All right, my friends, welcome to Pensive Politics with Mr. Watson. Excuse me for the being very, very late, and I hope everything's working, because I don't know, man. I'm trying out this new format. We're putting on more graphics, so things have just been a little bit chaotic recently, but I most certainly hope all of you are having a good day, and I hope you guys can hear me. Normally I would have an intro, and we do have an intro, but it's not working right now. So we'll just deal with that as time goes on. But let me know if you guys can hear me, then I'll get into everything else, because I'm still trying to make this work. But thank you all for being here so far. Thank you guys who were here early. I appreciate it. My apologies that I could not extend the same courtesy to you. You can hear me? Okay, good. Very, very good. Very, very good. All right. Oh, so am I. So am I, Alexandra. All right, guys. So, yes, don't worry, Edward. Your music will be coming up soon. Don't worry. On Saturday's show, and I may do a call-in. I don't know, but on Saturday's show, I will be sure that the intro will be there. It's just we have had a lot of glitches with our tech stuff. Thank you, Sour. Appreciate it. So I just want to thank you guys for being here. Normally, when I did this podcast on just doing pre-recorded, I would have a very long intro, but I'm going to forget about that today. I'm going to change up the style how I do this stuff, and I have to talk to you guys. So just bear with me for a little bit. And for all of you who may be wondering what exactly this is. So I have two primary assets to my sort of media thing right now. I have this YouTube channel, and I have the podcast called Pensive Politics. Now, Pensive Politics, before this point in time, was a pre-recorded production. I put it up as an audio-only production on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you name it. And, well, that was what I would do. But I've decided that it would be more interactive and better for the brand, better for you guys if you got a chance to hear me talk and interact with me live. So that's what we're doing. So now the podcast is live. Great to be able to say hi. I found you from the interview Allison's a good lady. She's a great lady. There'll be more collaborations with me and her very soon. Yes, very soon. So, my friends, we're going to talk about three things today, and you guys probably see in the title. Number one, the Hillary Clinton made a comment recently about the voting laws in America, particularly the ones that have been passed by Georgia and a few others. And she is claiming that they are exemplars of white supremacy. And, of course, this is a talking point that a lot of left has been using for a long while now. And so I want to kind of explore that claim, explore the idea of white supremacy a little bit, not necessarily in the abstract, but as it relates to certain political concepts, and then try to get to the core of what people are trying to say. Because a lot of times we see doublespeak from these people, especially Hillary Clinton, right? We have to understand that Hillary Clinton herself is a very cunning politician. She's a cunning politician. Now, her cunning didn't save her a few years ago. In fact, nothing really saved her a few years ago. A few years ago, she was acting as if she was riding high above the peasants that she was trying to get their votes from. She was acting as if she was unimpeachable. It's why she had such a very, very rather dismissive attitude towards a lot of American voters. It's why that she called all of Trump's supporters, who were millions of Americans, a basket of deplorables. She uses doublespeak. And the fact that she uses doublespeak is kind of indicative of something a little bit larger, in my opinion. But first, before I get into that, I will talk about my appearance on Fox Soul last night. I was on the Tammi Mac Late Show, and the Tammi Mac Late Show is, in my opinion, a good place to come hash out some ideas. And I'll also be talking about the big tech lawsuit that President Trump filed today. He filed a class action lawsuit in Florida against a few tech companies like YouTube and Facebook. I'll get into that. And then at the end of this broadcast, I will be sure to do a call-in stream so that if any of you want to talk to me, we can call in. All right, guys. So before I get into anything else, let's talk about what happened last night. So a few days ago, a good friend of mine, Kimmy Katiti, who many of you are familiar with, who many of you like, I love her to death, we had an interview. And, Kimmy told me Christian, I got this opportunity. I want you to see it. And one thing led to another, as the old adage would say. And I eventually got on Fox Soul. And I was on Fox Soul last night around 11 o'clock at night, at an ungodly hour of the night, even though I stay up way past then typically. I was on Fox Soul, and I was involved in a roughly 60-minute conversation about critical race theory. And, first of all, whenever I get into any kind of debate or conversation, there is something different that comes out of my spirit. Something seismic happens. Something shifts and stirs in the atmosphere, rather. And that shift and stirring in the atmosphere is indicative, in my opinion, of a deeper passion that I have, a deeper connection, rather, that I have for these issues. So when I debate people, I don't go into how can I win this mode. I go into what is the truth mode. Because very oftentimes in our society, no one cares, and this is a problem in a lot of contemporary areas, not just American society. No one cares anymore about the pursuit of truth for the sake of the pursuit of truth. Now, the ancient Greeks, the problem was they cared so much about the pursuit of truth that they rationalized their way to certain things, and they never considered the practical applications of their principles. You can see this neatly reflected in the ancient Greek idea of science. Ancient Greek science, even though it was quite revolutionary for their age, was focused entirely on the abstract. And so many people these days are focused entirely on the abstract idea of a winning and what that idea may give them for their social or political capital. Especially folks in my industry, right? Especially folks in my industry who are particularly concerned with getting a hit on YouTube or getting a hit on the internet and going viral because they own someone in a debate. This is not the epistemically wise way to go about doing certain things like this. Anyway, I wasn't caring about winning. I was caring about speaking the truth. So there were a few times in that conversation, Fox Soul, where the fire was just coming out of my mouth and I was just going 10,000 miles per hour. Not because I wanted to bulldoze my opponent, but because I wanted to get out what I had to say. And I've noticed a few things about not only Fox Soul, but a lot of these network TV shows. I've noticed a few things, or quasi-network TV shows. Fox Soul, for in all fairness, it's a streaming show. Although it is an attempt by Fox Corporation, which runs Fox News, to get into the digital space, because they understand the digital space is being upended righteously by the forces of new media, right? And I was listening to a video sent to me by a supporter, a good supporter of mine. I think he's in the chat right now. Yesterday, about how our epistemic structures in America, in the world rather, are fundamentally flawed. How we understand knowledge, how we get to the point of acquiring knowledge, they are flawed insofar as a lot of things are assumed to be true. And when you question those things, you are seen as a social pariah. And a lot of our advancements as human beings, as Americans, have been predicated upon that idea. And I think you see that neatly reflected in a lot of the conversation surrounding critical race theory. So one of the things that I've noticed, though, and just in general with network news, is that network news, they want to put you into a confined space, right? They want to put you, have like a 5-minute segment, and each person gets 1 minute to speak. So the problem with the hit that I had last night was that I had a lot to say about some of the claims that were made during that media appearance, but unfortunately, I was not quite able to say them because of the time constraints of the network. Now, for example, one of the pastor that I was debating, I forgot what his name was, he made a claim that policing in America, the foundations of modern policing in America, are slave patrols. That was the claim that he made. They are slave patrols. Now, this is a categorically false statement. The foundations of policing in America are not slave patrols. They are rather vice patrols. So policing was conceived of in America as an attempt to police certain moral behaviors, right? Not necessarily as an attempt to police slaves. Now, in the southern United States, a lot of people assume that policing was formed from slave patrols because slave patrols were the earliest form of policing in the Southern United States. But the modern idea of policing did not necessarily come from the Southern United States. It came from Boston, New York, Chicago, and all these other metropolitan areas, which by the 1800s and 1880s actually had developed their own metropolitan police forces. So I wanted to mention this, but of course I didn't get the opportunity because when I was about to make this point, I was interrupted by the constraints of the time network. And so and this really brings us to an interesting point about knowledge. If knowledge is confined to a particular time slot, is that time slot really trying to create the most amount of knowledge that it possibly could create? If knowledge is boxed into a 5-minute segment, then is that really knowledge, or is that rather screaming? Is that screeching? The reason why there are so many cat fights on the news today is because the news today is woefully restricted. It's woefully restricted to a particular time frame. And people are expected to just go back and forth, talk over each other, because that's what gets ratings. But I say to you today, my friends, that's not the model that Christian Watson follows. And when Christian Watson is put into that model, what happens? Well, what happens is he sometimes does well, sometimes he doesn't do very well. So that was the first problem. There were so many points that could have been made about the claims that were afforded during that discussion, but I couldn't make them because of the time constraints. Now, this is no one's fault. If it's anyone's fault, it's the fault of the media. It's why I do this podcast. It's why I do this podcast. It's why I do my channel, because we are breaking the paradigm. We are breaking the shackles. We are breaking the limitations of the corporate-owned media structure. And when my biggest complaint is that when people say this kind of stuff, they seem very conspiratorial and belligerent, and that's not what I'm doing whatsoever. What I'm saying is there is a structure to how information has been dispensed over the past 40 to 50 years that is being shattered in the past 10 to 15 years by the advent, the sort of destruction of the watchdog, the sort of destruction of the watchman, the sort of ripping down of the gates of the gatekeepers, rather. That's what's happening here. The walls are tumbling down. And when the walls tumble down, my friends, what happens are a few things. If there's a wall in front of your vision and it comes down, you have to calibrate your senses, calibrate your mind to what you are seeing. What do I mean by this? So if you are in a dark room, for example, and you haven't had any kind of light, sunlight or otherwise, for about a few minutes, and you flick on the light, your eyes have to calibrate to the new sensations that you're seeing. Now, you have had a generation of Americans in their 50s, 40s, 30s even, who have been raised on Ted Koppel, who have been raised on Walter Cronkite, who have been raised on CNN. And when that kind of information is no longer the primary result of information, what happens? They have to recalibrate their minds and their eyes to something different. But here's the point, though. When I have to recalibrate my mind and my eyes to, say, I don't know, to the light that comes into my room after I turn the light on, imagine if I had to recalibrate my entire way of consuming information that has been pushed down my throat and down my mind my entire life. We are in a recalibration period, my friends. We are recalibrating the way we get information. Now, in my generation, I'm 21. In my generation, I have always had the apps. I've always had YouTube from as long as I can remember, right? I've always had these kind of things. So for me, I'm not recalibrating anything. I've already escaped the paradigm network news. But there are people who are voting and supporting politicians and who are doing all other kinds of politically consequential stuff who have refused or are having trouble with recalibrating their mind. However, Fox Soul, back to this point, is an example of a corporate media structure that wants to fashion itself for the new generation. The new generation is a generation that will not be shackled by epistemic barriers built upon simplified knowledge. That's just not happening. The rise of the long-form podcast is an antidote to that kind of mediocrity. And the corporate media structure gets that. They understand that very well. And the fact they understand that means they're going to market for that. Now, what's the problem with this? This is the second point I got to make about this appearance I had last night. You cannot slay new demons with old tactics. You cannot slay new demons with old tactics. What do I mean? When you go into a different environment, ideally, if you're trying to interact with that environment, your methods change. If I were to speak to a group of youth in an inner city, I wouldn't speak how I normally speak. Not because I view them less, but because I understand those people in that place may be at a certain point that I need to reach them at. Likewise, if I were to speak before a crowd of PhDs in philosophy, I would speak probably higher than I'm speaking right now. So what do I mean by this? What I mean is this. Too much Jordan Peterson. I don't watch Jordan Peterson. I don't look. Okay. Look. I don't watch Jordan Peterson. I respect Jordan Peterson. I have nothing against Jordan Peterson. I don't watch Jordan Peterson. So no, this is not me copying Jordan Peterson. I don't look. So it was Emerson who said, "Nothing is at last sacred but the sanctity of your own mind." And I take that very seriously. Because Christian Watson is not anyone else except who Christian Watson was divinely ordained to be. Okay, you're being a troll now. Okay. Christian Watson is not anyone else. And in fact, I'm putting you in timeout, buddy. So Christian Watson is not anyone else except who Christian Watson was ordained to be. Christian Watson is who he is because he's Christian Watson. And Jordan Peterson is who he is because Jordan Peterson has had years of Jungian and Freudian psychological training. And by the way, I'm not too big into Jung or Freud. I don't embrace either of those thinkers very much, especially not Freud. Jung, I can agree with on some issues, but I'm currently reading an anthology of Jung, and there are just some issues I think that are just ridiculous. I mean, this idea of the collective unconscious and all that, I just can't get down with it. But it's not to say that Jung has nothing to give us. It has plenty to give us, of course. Plenty to give us. But as I was saying, you cannot slay new demons with old tactics. So the corporate media cannot have the same format they have on network TV if they're going to be on YouTube, because there are different audiences in different environments which require different messaging. But the corporate news structure does not have the incentive to change beyond the bare ability to maintain its bottom line. They don't have the incentive to change beyond that. If they can maintain an appearance of progress, they're fine. And this gets into the idea of appearance versus reality, which is a little bit more than I think that we can deal with on this show. But regardless of my complaints, right, Bob's right. So epistemic just means relating to knowledge. Right. So when I say the epistemic structure of the corporate media, what I'm saying is how the corporate media conducts itself in relation to knowledge. Because the media is meant to be a disseminator of certain kinds of knowledge. So the media is actually uniquely involved and primarily involved with knowledge. So when you have a media that is primarily involved with knowledge, you have to look, okay, how are they dispensing the knowledge? How are they conveying the knowledge, right? And I find the corporate media's way of conveying knowledge is overly simplistic. It is overly restrictive, and it is not conducive to having deep and serious conversations, about certain issues. And so back to this appearance. And if you guys have not seen the appearance, I'll put a link for it in the description in a moment. Back to this appearance, though. There was an educator in the conversation. And this probably perhaps the most concerning thing. The educator in the conversation was very dead set on the idea that her experience as an educator overrode my experience as a non-educator. Because apparently, her experience as an educator, watch this, automatically qualifies her to arrive at the correct assumptions concerning educators. Now, we understand why medium, Bob writes, medium matters a lot. It doesn't matter how good of a debater you are. Yes, correct. If the best gladiator is thrown into I can't get a good metaphor here. But if someone who has fought on land their entire life, right? If a gladiator who's fought on land his entire life was tossed to the sea, and he is forced to go fight fight sharks, he could possibly fail. Even if he was the best champion in that society, he could conceivably fail because he wasn't trained on that ground. If you are primed towards a certain kind of medium and you're used to a certain kind of medium, you could possibly fail in a different kind of medium. Right, exactly. So this idea as an educator, this idea of her being an educator and having the right answers, number one, as Overlook pointed out, it's a pivotal authority. Number two, it is a reflection of standpoint. Yep. Yes. It is a reflection of standpoint epistemology. Now, beyond standpoint epistemology being subjective, which is a big problem with standpoint epistemology, there's another problem with standpoint epistemology too. Standpoint epistemology ties knowledge to, it ties the basis of knowledge to, and it makes it conditional. It makes it very conditional, right? I think that you can have subjective opinions and those that interact with an objective sense of knowledge. But when you make knowledge itself conditional, you're doing away with the basis of any kind of outside interference with your idea of knowledge. And that's basically what she was doing. She was basically saying, I'm an educator, and since I'm an educator, therefore X, Y, Z. And I wanted to say again, I didn't get this opportunity. I wanted to say to her, and because you said, well, Christian, you're not in my classroom. You're not in my classroom, Christian Watson, so you can't say anything. Of course I can. Because I understand that there are 3,500 schools that have been given materials by the 1619 Project and are using those materials to teach kids. I absolutely do understand. I don't have to be in your classroom to understand that there is, according to the National Education Association a few days ago, a push to enshrine critical race theory tenets into the curricula of America's schools. I don't have to be in your classroom to understand these things. And a lot of these people who are with this woke stuff, they're fundamentally vague in their descriptions. The pastor during the Fox Soul interview, the pastor kept saying, well, critical race theory is very nebulous. To which I wanted to say, I didn't get into this, I wanted to say, okay, if it's so nebulous, then why in the world are you sitting here advocating for it? You have to, see, it's very easy to advocate for a position that you have not defined yet. Well, okay. For me, it's not easy because I would want to know, what am I advocating for? But for a lot of people who deal in appearances, not realities, it's very, very simple to advocate for a position they have not defined yet. Because guess what? Number one, they don't have to commit to a position, which makes it very hard to engage them. And number two, it allows them to make the position they hold anything they want it to be, which, again, is troublesome if we're in the business of finding the truth, because the truth is not anything we want it to be. The truth is a very concrete thing. So the pastor kept getting into that, and I found that concerning. Patrice says they should be eager to show themselves on camera to parents if they're doing a good. Yeah. Well, Patrice, I think that a lot of we have seen furious anger, right, righteous rage from many parents about critical race theory. Right, we see it in Loudoun County, Virginia. We see it all across the nation. We see it here in my home state of Georgia. But there are there are a contingent of parents, I suspect, because there are a contingent of teachers that I suspect would, oh dear, being blessed today. So passing some, thank you. The one voice, thank you so much for your donation. I mean, it means a lot to me. As an aside, just pick up download. So, get ready. First of all, I have a notebook out. It's been a long time since I read the essay. Have a notebook out. Right, have a notebook out or a Google document. Locke's epistemology is very interesting. He doesn't, Locke actually had a very interesting objection to free will. I think Locke says that we can't have a free will because freedom is an aspect of our being and the will is a constituent aspect of our being. So that is kind of you're misplacing freedom whereas it should apply to our humanity. It shouldn't be confined to a single part of our humanity. But understand that the essay concerning human understanding is very much rooted in empiricism. It's very much concerned with God and how that factors into our knowledge. So just be open-minded. Just have a notebook out and enjoy, because John Locke, in my opinion, is one of the greatest thinkers in the Western canon. Now, of course, John Locke borrowed a lot of things from a lot of very different thinkers like Hugo Grotius and Samuel von Pufendorf, who in their own rights were great, in my opinion, grossly underrated thinkers. So enjoy Locke. I encourage you to read more of Locke. I encourage you to read A Letter Concerning Toleration. I encourage you to read, if you have not already, please read The Second Treatise of Government. Locke is a profound thinker, so I think you'll enjoy him. But back to the Fox Soul. So what are my points? My points are this. There are certain environments in which certain tools are more appropriate than other tools. And the corporate media is missing that in their attempt to expand into the digital media space. And I think I kind of bear the brunt of that. So I suspect I'll be back on Fox News, Fox News, Fox Soul, excuse me, owned by the same company but very different entities. Fox Soul sometime soon. I suspect I will be. But look, I ultimately am very proud of my appearance there, and I think all of you will be proud too. And I am in this fight, ladies and gentlemen, because I genuinely believe, as I mentioned in the debate, that the moral character of America is fundamentally good. And let me expand on what I mean when I say that, because some people think that when I say that I'm doing some sort of pseudo-religious tribute. No. A nation only has moral character insofar as the principles that it is predicated upon have moral substance. Let me say that again. A nation only has moral character insofar as the principles it is predicated upon have moral substance. The moral substance of the American principle. Hold on. John, thank you, buddy. Keep up the great work and never stop honing your philosophy. Brother, I appreciate it. Thank you for your donation. I'm blessed to have your viewership and your support and your love. So thank you, man. I appreciate it. So back to the moral substance. The American idea is rooted in observable truths about human beings. It is rooted in the idea, the fact that we do have reason. It is rooted in the idea, the fact that our reason allows us to be a vessel, a vehicle for higher ideas. It is rooted in the fact that our reason allows us to understand why human beings are fundamentally, at our core, in our ontology, are equal. They are rooted in so many observable facts, axioms rather, that it is impossible, unless those principles were besmirched and the government was abolished and rebuilt from a different fire of principles. It is impossible for America to be an evil nation. It is impossible for America to be the sum of its mistakes. It is impossible. It is a conceptual impossibility. But there is oftentimes a confusion between America's concept, which very much interacts with America, the material the material thing, and the material conditions of America that may not cohere with that idea. When I speak of America, I do not speak of America in the abstract, right? No, I mean America how it actually is. You could not have a country whose founders both affirmed and hated slavery at the same time. You could not have a country that is evil, a lot of whose people, in an era in which slavery was very fashionable, were able to rise up and say no more, using the levers of their rights that were established in the American framework. You cannot have a country that is evil, that can change and spin on its heel from evil to justice in less than 270 or 250 years. You cannot have a country that is evil. When we talk about countries being evil, my friends, we're assigning moral qualities to these grand, big ideas that we're not trying to account for. Countries are never evil. The people in those countries, the governments rather, can be evil. And the American government has absolutely been evil. In my opinion, the American government still is evil in many cases. You have a government that gathers metadata from you in an attempt to protect you from this nebulous terrorist threat. You got a government that constantly lies to you and justifies things on the basis of lies. Gulf of Tonkin, Iraq War. You have a government that punishes people for doing the right thing. Snowden, for example. Julian Assange, who they're trying to extradite him back to America right now. They want to have Assange's throat because Assange exposed a lot of the intelligence infrastructure's advances on the privacy of the American citizenry. You have a government. But I do not think for a second, for a moment, that the government itself, the tool of the government, is what's doing this. It's the people within it. And we have to get that. So when we say that America is a good nation, what I'm saying is the structure of our government is built upon fundamentally good ideas, and a lot of the people reflect that. Now, I just posed to you a biconditional statement, right? The ideas of the country and the people. So one may pose as a corollary, well, Christian, if the people become evil, what happens? Well, the ideas are still pure. Now, look, human beings are vessels for ideas, right? So we can't have ideas be effective, really, unless they're external to us and don't require us to do anything with, right? So the idea of gravity, more than an idea, it's a law. And I do believe that human nature is predicated upon certain laws. Am I making sense to you guys? I'm trying to go through the thought process here about why America is a fundamentally good nation. And so the ideas of America are fundamentally good because they're rooted in observable facts that are conducive to human harmony, and that is the idea of freedom. And to confuse the conceptual foundations of America with the conditions of America at any given time is to engage in a falsehood. And this is what a lot of people on the left do every single time. Okay. Carson, man. One of my good friends. I don't know the difference between a hippie and a hipster, but it's fun to watch either. That's funny. That's funny. Patrice says this is exactly why immigrants should be vetted if they hate our foundation. Okay, so Patrice, I believe in the freedom of movement of peoples. I believe if someone wants to come to America peacefully in a way that is voluntary to their being, they should be able to do so. If there are certain people who come to America with a certain set of values, the solution should not be vet their values. The solution should be convince them. We shouldn't take for granted. Look, I mention the natural law and axiomatic principles and conceptual fortitude all the time because they're important. But I don't take it for granted that other people agree with me. I don't take that for granted. I don't do that. What I do is I argue them forcefully and passionately with logical rigor and philosophical fire that comes out of my tongue, so people can both get it in an emotional way and a logical way. And that changes hearts and minds. Not everyone who comes to America is going to be an adherent to natural law and is going to believe in the values of our Constitution. They may be skeptical of our Constitution. And guess what? People who are skeptical of the Constitution should still be allowed in the country, because ultimately, it's unjust for me to try to impose a limitation upon their movement unless they pose a threat to everyone else. And having a different set of opinions is not a threat. I guess to some people it's a threat, but not to me. Not to any prudent person. America was built upon a different set of opinions, right? The Federalists, the Anti-Federalists, they fought. Some of the Anti-Federalists, like Patrick Henry, didn't even go to the signing of the Constitution. They didn't even go because they were mad. They didn't get what they wanted. America was birthed from the fires of division. So if there are immigrants who want to come into the country and may not have all of our values or all of the constitutional values, fine. We got work to do, man. We got work to do. The dynamic soul of a human being will never be handicapped by force. The dynamic soul of a human being will never be handicapped by force. The mind cannot be captured by force. Now, it can be subjugated by force, but that doesn't necessarily change the mind. What it does is it changes how someone perceives a particular thing for a particular purpose, right? We cannot use force, i.e. stopping someone's freedom of movement, as a means of changing their heart. We have to use the art of communication, the tongue, that which separates us from the beasts, to speak life towards someone's paradigm, to speak life, the best ideas, the better ideas. That's what we got to do. Should there be a baseline of values, though? I feel like natural law should be given. Most Americans don't know what natural law is, brother. Most Americans don't know what that is. Now, does that mean it shouldn't be a given? Well, most Americans are fundamentally illiterate in their country's history. Just being honest, and that's unfortunate. No, look, if an immigrant says, look, there are many different competing ideologies which seem to cohere with the idea of America, right? There's a sort of utilitarian idea of America. The idea that the ideas of America are not good because they're nationally true, but the ideas of America are good because they bring the best good to most people, right? We can bring the most freedom to most people. There's sort of utilitarian idea. So if I were to say that the natural law must be the basis for us admitting people into our country, I would be excluding other perspectives that I disagree with, but are equally as reverent to the American idea, but in a very different way. You can be reverent to the American idea, albeit in a much more inferior way than before, if you believe in utilitarianism. Now, I think utilitarianism is bunk, personally, but you can still be reverent to the American idea, you know. So I don't think you need. I'm not sure we should say we should have a ethical stand. We should have a sort of ethical requirement that all people come to the country hold a particular opinion. So, sure, we could do that. Although I think that the immigration laws in this country are so entwined into the lives of people who come here, whether they're overstaying a visa or whatever, that I'm not entirely sure you can talk about residency without indeed talking about citizenship, right? You can't really do that. So if the laws were not so interconnected and so complex to the point where there are restrictions on certain people who stay here and so on and so forth, which again are violations of the freedom of movement, then I think that we could distinguish the two, but we can't because the structure of the government is not going to distinguish the two. You've lived your lives by rules you had growing up, and it's kind of hard to change those rules on you because someone who didn't participate wants to change it. Fine, if they don't want to. What do you mean, Patrice? I've lived my life by the rules you had growing up. I didn't follow many rules, Patrice. I was always a rebel, dude. I was always a rebel, you know. I still am a rebel, too. What do you mean? Elaborate a little bit more, Patrice. Several countries who accept it to many people don't believe in Western bound. So there's a big difference between So a few years ago, there was a big migrant crisis, right? Syria and all the other countries in the Middle East were being bombed to hell. And a lot of people came from those countries and they went up to Europe. They came over to Germany, they came over to England, came over to Sweden. And there's a big difference between allowing people to move freely into a country and addressing a influx of people in a time of crisis. There's a very big difference. But the impacts of having a multicultural society are very complex. There is evidence to suggest that it may undermine certain kinds of social cohesion, which is why I believe in cultural pluralism. I believe in having many different cultural beliefs exist in the same area under the umbrella of common ground. So now you have areas of England where there are people who of the Islamic tradition who are pushing for Sharia law. Now, I'm not very well educated on English law, but I'm going to assume that since a lot of American constitutional foundations come from England, that it would be very difficult in most circumstances for Sharia law to actually become enacted. I'm going to assume that in that country. In America, it would certainly be virtually impossible for Sharia law to become enacted. So as long as there is look, bad ideas exist everywhere. And you're not going to escape them by keeping out certain people because you assume they have bad ideas. Look, there are plenty of Muslims who don't want to destroy people, who don't want to do jihad. Plenty of that don't. And they come to certain countries to have better life. So you have to recognize, you have to see that people, when they're moving to certain countries, they're typically doing so for rational purposes. So I just think that the conversation surrounding all that kind of stuff, culture and immigration, is mired in appearances. It's mired in what could happen as a result of having ideologically divergent people in a certain area, rather than being rooted in the actual reasons or trying to understand the actual reasons why folks flee their country for other countries. There's a reason why the migrants at the border right now have fled South America for America, because their countries are overrun with drugs and cartels and gangs and corrupt police officers, and their subsistence rate, and they just don't have much opportunity there. So why would they come to America to destroy the opportunity they had to escape their roots, to escape their troubles? It makes no sense to me, in my personal opinion. Okay, a citizen can vote, a permanent resident can't. That's something that's... I mean, I want to make voting so insignificant to the existence of this country that this is not even a question. I'm getting tired of a lot of this talk of, well, if we let immigrants in, they'll vote a certain way. Again, change their minds. If you don't want, look, if I told you that if we let 5,000 Swedish people in, they were all going to vote Republican or conservative, most folks on the right would be like, okay, sounds okay. Doesn't threaten our values. When most folks in Sweden are pretty left-wing. I mean, you cannot guess how someone's going to vote because of their ethnicity. Hispanics went for Trump big time last election cycle. You cannot guess that. But there's so much guesswork going into these issues that we're not really reaching a stable conclusion, in my opinion. What does it mean to integrate into a society, though, Patrice? Like, for example, we have bastions of cultural pluralism across America, right? New York City, Chinatown, Little Italy, all those places. Miami, Little Cuba, Little Jamaica. Not everyone. First of all, there is no broader American culture. That just doesn't exist. There are different regions of the country that have different sets of cultures. However, there are broader American principles, and the broader principles compel us to do certain things. So I don't care if someone wants to go and worship Buddha and be in America. I don't care if someone wants to go and, eat certain kinds of cuisine and be in America. I don't care if someone wants to go and be a Greenpeace activist and be in America. So long as they understand that there are some basic values that they cannot violate if they want to continue to exist in this country. Now, whether they violate them through a political action or not is a different case. Different case. Within the ghettos, C3PU says, I personally don't think that we should prevent people to immigrate, but we just can't let them live in ghettos where they don't adopt at least part of the values of the country they can. Look, I don't want anyone to come in here and live in a ghetto. But again, that's their. If you come to America with nothing, this is the story of the immigrants in the 1920s too. You can't expect to immediately be prosperous. But a lot of the immigrants of the 1920s came to America and they revitalized our country. They made it prettier. They made it richer. And many of those families now from the 1920s are doing quite well. Many of them are either middle class or otherwise. It's generational. And many immigrants, particularly from Mexico, come to America, get involved in agriculture, under the table most of the time, and they bring back wealth to their families, or they create families here. And so by doing that, they are respecting the values of America. The capitalistic structure of America promotes the free and voluntary use of human energy for productive ends. And peaceful ends, too. And perpetuating an entire industry that essentially allows America to eat fruit at very cheap rates, not just fruit, rather, but also vegetables and other kinds of produce, that's perfectly ethical. And not all laws need to be respected either, in my opinion. In certain areas of the country, Patrice, there are certain languages that are more dominant. If I go to Chinatown, Mandarin is going to be the dominant language. If I go to Miami, Cuban and Spanish are going to be the dominant. Oh, Cuban. Haha. Excuse me. Spanish, not Cuban. That's an ignorant moment. Excuse me. Spanish is going to be. Sorry. Spanish will be the dominant language. If I go to Southern California, parts of Southern California, Spanish will be the dominant language there too. I mean, what's the dominant language? We have to do this contextually, right? Now, I agree with everything else. I don't think you should try to change laws legally. You should not burden the welfare system. But some laws don't deserve respect, in my opinion. All right, so moving on. Okay, I talked ad nauseum about the structure of the corporate media. So moving on to the next topic. Hillary Clinton is back in the news. Let me pull this up. Hillary Clinton is back in the news for a boneheaded comment again. Yes, so this is an article from The Hill here. The article reads that Hillary Clinton blasts state election bills as move towards white supremacist authoritarianism. So, as many of you have heard, there has been a rash of bills coming out of several states, Texas, Georgia, my home state, which have gotten quite a bit of controversy and quite a bit of anger from many left-leaning groups, and they have been derided as attempts at Jim Crowe. Now, it's very odd because some of the bills, like the one in Georgia, quite literally extends the period of early voting. It makes it actually easier to do so. Albeit it limits drop boxes, but I think that it does so in a rather reasonable way that gives a lot of people enough time to still cast their vote. So I just find it very odd that a lot of people like Hillary Clinton are phrasing this entire adventure of bills, which are happening, and guess what? In a lot of conservative circles, the idea of election fraud has been talked about ad nauseum, and I'm not talking about it because I like my channel. I'm not going to do that. But even before this election right here, even before this last election, the idea of election fraud or voter fraud in general, they have been themes and staples throughout American society. So these voting bills are not necessarily very new, and I don't think they're necessarily connected to Jim Crowe. And here's the problem. I think that when you sanctify privileges, when someone sanctifies a privilege, we tend to behave unreasonably towards those privileges. We tend to treat privileges as an aspect of our existence, an indispensable aspect of our existence. What do I mean? Well, let's look at what Hillary Clinton said here. She said the following in an op-ed written for Democracy Docket. She says, each of these proposals, she's talking about the voting bills, disproportionately prevents people of color from casting their ballots, and each is egregious in its own right, presumably for that reason. Now, this is not correct. I mean, if a person of color cannot get an ID, I don't know what's happening to that person of color. If a person of color does not know how to read instructions about where to go to put their ballots, I don't understand. This is just condescending stuff to me. And by the way, the idea of a person of color is just ridiculous. I'm not a person of color whatsoever. I'm an individual. But anyway, so we have two things going on in that statement right there. Number one, Hillary Clinton is grouping certain people into classes, which makes it easier to try to account for the desires and the objectives for everyone in that class. So here's the idea here. I cannot account for people who are in a certain class. The idea of someone being a person of color doesn't necessarily tell me anything meaningful about that person's desires or their place in life. It doesn't. What it does tells me that they have a certain physiology that has been accredited unjust, or undue rather, social significance. So, but Hillary Clinton is engaging in these sort of false ideas by grouping the destinies of people who look a certain way together. And that's just not correct. That is not a really correct way to do things. But then, we got a second thing here. She is assuming that these people of color, who she's already established are not individuals, they're part of this class, which are structurally oppressed. And this is the entire idea of the structural determinism of critical race theory and all these ideologies. It's all right here for you people. So she's equating all of their conditions similarly and saying that they'll all face the same struggle to try to vote, which really ignores the fact that, again, voting is not more difficult in Georgia or in Texas than it was 2 years ago. If you know what time to vote, if you know the time frames how to vote, you can go vote. Now, the problem is America, and this is what I meant when I say if you sanctify a privilege. If you sanctify a privilege, my friends, and I'm going to lose people for saying this, and excuse me for my stopping. I'm tired today. I'm gonna lose some folks for saying this. Voting is not a right, it is a privilege. You do not have a right to the ballot box. You do not have the right to do that. Because if I believe that voting is a right, a few things happen. Number one, I am implying that my rights come from a man-made structure, i.e. the government. That's false. Number two, I am implying that I have a right to be given something, which implies that my rights are not natural or innate. That's false. By the way, you have no obligation to someone else's grace, labor, or stuff. That's number two. Number three, with these two falsehoods that have animated 60 plus years of political discourse around voting and has tied every single attempt to secure and preserve the privilege of voting to Jim Crowe, to literacy tests, you have an entire generation of people who think that they are given stuff or they must be given, so that there's an obligation to be given stuff. So you have this sort of trifecta of doom, which has ensnared the voting conversation and has been tied to the existence of certain kinds of people, i.e. African Americans. Now, okay, hold on. Lauren, you could call it a privilege given justice. I agree. No, hey, I agree. It is a privilege. It is a privilege. And yes, Pius, this is the distinction between negative rights and positive rights. And this really, and this kind of compels us to ask the question: where is the obligation placed? Because rights are as much a description of a natural condition of the human being as they are a description of obligations, right? So rights have two sides to them, more than two sides, for the purposes of this conversation, for two sides, right? So they're a description of our natural condition as a human being, and they're also a description of obligations. Because if we have a natural condition and we hold that natural condition to tell us certain things about ourselves that are inviolable, that need not be that should not be attacked, we are immediately getting into the idea of obligation as well. So description and obligation. When you get into positive liberty, the obligation doesn't have a foundation. In fact, well, actually, it does. The obligation has a foundation in conditions. Temporary, fleeting, contingent conditions. So the basis for voting being a right is predicated upon quicksand that is accentuated by the struggles that some people have had to establish voting as a right. I'm not going to say, if I say that voting's not a right, that is immediately taken to be an insult against all the people who fought for civil rights. But civil rights, as Thomas Paine said, my friends, are simply the civil equivalent of natural rights. That means you have to have natural rights to provide for civil rights. You cannot have anti-natural rights ideas like positive liberty and then have civil rights. That's not, that's not what happens. You get an inversion at that point. An inversion. A distortion. And unfortunately, many in the civil rights movement were fighting for a distortion. Voting is a privilege that belongs to the citizens of this country and should be preserved insofar as is reasonable. But it's not a right. It's not a right. All right, hold on. Okay, just sending some love. Oh, Alexandra, you bless my day. You bless my day, my friend. You bless my day. I'm so grateful for you, Mr. Watson. Stay pensive forever, brother. And happy belated Independence Day. Love the video for the holiday. Thank you so much, Alexandra. Thank you for the love. Thank you for the support. Thank you for thank you just for your grace, and thank you. I appreciate it very much. All right. Christian wants to be the philosopher. No Platonic language here, please. No, we don't believe in that dictatorial nonsense. No. I favor. Oh, God. Oh my. Well, so I don't. Okay, so I don't necessarily agree. I don't agree. First, okay, I don't think voting's a right. I think it's a privilege. But I don't think we can restrict voting on the basis of if we had here's what I think. If we had a structure of government that didn't require us to vote so much, if there wasn't so much at stake, and this is the point that Bastiat made, right? Frederick Bastiat made this in the law. If you had lesser interests invested in the structure of the government, if you had less policies that serve different groups, voting wouldn't be a big deal. But as the New Deal showed us, as the Great Society showed us, so many things, the livelihood of so many people have been put on the line because the government has decided to come in and be their savior. Therefore, voting is then a matter of life and death. Voting is not a matter of looking at certain policy ideas that may or may not be good for the preservation of the republic. No. Voting is a matter of life and death. If you don't vote, you could lose your Social Security. If you don't vote, you could lose your Medicare. If you don't vote, you could lose your whatever benefit. And again, that's a part of the sanctification of the right. Of the privilege. That is a part of the sanctification of the privilege. We have taken the privilege from its proper place and we have anointed it on a pedestal. That's a problem. It's a serious problem. So no, I say if we're going to attack voting, well, let's not do that. Let's attack the policies that move so many people to vote. But anyway, back to Hillary Clinton. Back to her. Because we got to deal with this lady. We got to deal with her. And in about 2 or 3 minutes, I'm going to be going on break. When I come back, instead of doing another hour, I'm going to just do call-ins, okay, for an hour. Because my mind, as you guys can probably tell, is running on fumes. So I'm going to do a few more minutes on this Hillary Clinton lady, and I'm going to do another an hour of call-ins. Okay. So she also said that, and this is from the Hill article again, she called the effort to pass the bills, these are the voting bills, in Georgia and Texas and so on, a concerted attempt to destabilize the democratic process and delegitimize our multiracial democracy, and contended that the pieces of legislation are no different from the Jim Crow past. Now, we get into the idea of historicism here. The idea that you can understand the present by appealing to the past entirely. The idea that that history has this sort of natural course of progression, the sort of determined course of progression that is going to get you to a particular place. So the idea here with Hillary Clinton is that since I can find something in history that may have been similar in form but not in content to this thing, and that thing in history is illegitimate and evil as the Jim Crow voting restriction laws were, I can demean these laws without actually engaging with their content. It is an attempt, once again, it's an attempt at ad hominem, to smear something for its image and not for its content of the substance. What about if you want to abolish the income tax? What about it? I support that. Why should the government own? I agree with you. What do you mean? I agree with you. No, I mean, I don't understand. I agree with you. I think so. So when I say that, okay, back to voting. I guess Hillary Clinton can wait for a moment. When I say that America needs to reduce the amount of stake that it has in public policy, I mean that every single thing that binds individual wills to a public policy outcome needs to die. Social Security needs to be privatized because it is fundamentally immoral to take from me to pay for someone else who I had no agreement with to pay them. Medicaid, Medicare, something that needs to happen with them. The Affordable Care Act needs to die completely. You've had the Republican dynasty and the Democratic dynasty both in office, and both dynasties have maintained the Affordable Care Act. Now, albeit President Trump did kill the individual mandate. Thank God. Great. You can't force people to buy something they don't want to buy anymore. Thank God. But the Affordable Care Act is still where a lot of people get their health care from if they're not getting it through their employer. These entitlement programs have to go away before we can talk about a government that is not intrusive, before we can talk about getting rid of voting or whatever. Yeah. But, all right. So I have lost my train of thought about Hillary Clinton. I was going to talk about, Jim Crowe. Okay. So if I can take something from the past that appears analogous in form but not in content to what happened in the future, what I can then do, I can engage in ad hominem. And Hillary Clinton is engaging in an egregious ad hominem, is she not? By calling these voting bills Jim Crowe-esque. Because we don't have to debate if Jim Crowe is bad or not. We know Jim Crowe is bad. We accept it as a given. But if you liken something else to Jim Crowe, what happens? Well, what happens is a few things happen. Number one, that immediately taints the perception of that particular thing. Number two, the people who support that particular thing can be held to have supporting Jim Crowe, right? Fallacy after fallacy after fallacy. This is the rhetorical strategy that Hillary Clinton is using in her analysis here. She continued to write, this is Clinton, much of the blame for this backsliding, rests with the Supreme Court, which, thanks to the election of President Trump, is even more hostile to voting rights today than it was when it gutted a crucial provision of the Voting Rights Act in 2013. Now, we got to understand, back then, President Obama got 2 people onto the Supreme Court. I think 2 people on the Supreme Court. At least 1 person on the Supreme Court. The court has not always been firmly in Republican hands. And Roberts, the Chief Justice, has always played fast and loose with his values. Ever since he was appointed by Bush. So she also ignores the historical context as well. Okay, HRC. Yeah, no, right, Bob. She wasn't. She was not making a good faith argument. She was smearing her enemies. And here's what I want us to get into before I go to Collins. I'm going to do Collins in about 10 minutes. The idea of using white supremacy as the big boogeyman and having us reshape and rephrase our value system as it relates to how we engage with politics in America around white supremacy is the same. It has the danger of any conditional statement of values. What foundation do we stand on? So there's a critical race theorist called Mary Matsuda who argued in a paper she wrote called Words That Wound that white supremacists use words to hurt black people. And since white supremacists use words to hurt black people, we have to enact speech codes. And Matsuda also argues, that the Enlightenment idea of free speech has brought harm to certain people. Therefore, the Enlightenment idea of free speech needs to be reevaluated and getting rid of. She is against a near absolutist or absolutist reading of the First Amendment. It's a critical race theorist, Mary Matsuda. Look her up. This is what she believes. And we get back into the standpoint epistemology thing right here, too. The danger of using the white supremacy boogeyman as a means of political action is that it bases the foundation of American values on conditions, when America itself was never a conditional statement. America itself was never a conditional statement. America is an eternal statement. Now, it's an eternal statement that requires a lot of faith, but it's not a conditional statement. You don't get America without having the blood, sweat, and tears of the founders going back and forth over something. The 20-something-year-old Thomas Jefferson, one of what would be the greatest political treatise in the history of mankind. You don't have America without faith. Putting it simply. And yet I see that these opinions that want to anoint white supremacy as the creme de la creme of our problems today, Joe Biden calling white supremacy a domestic terrorist threat or whatever he said. I find those views to be troublesome because they root our values in conditions and they lose that spark of faith which made it possible for the American experiment in the first place. And I'm not saying you have to be a religious person to get on with this reasoning. You don't have to be a religious person at all. But that element of faith and the eternalness, the eternality of America, these are 2 essential things to the structure of our government. And it would appear to me that if you were to go against the eternality of America, the eternality of our positions, rather, and you were to use the government in a manner that is inconsistent with those internalities, you're trying to mix oil and water. You're trying to violate certain things that have been in motion before the government came into being. Isabel Patterson argued that governments are successful when they recognize the essentiality, I can't speak today, of human energy, the essentiality of practical human freedom and what that does for people. And she mentions Rome as an example of this in her book, because Rome, even though it had a lot of problems, was predicated upon the idea of the just, J-U-S, the just. It was a federation, right? Whereas Athens in Greece was an absolute democracy, Rome was a federation. They recognized that human energy, cannot be exercised fully without things being siphoned and separated into certain areas, without a division of powers, rather. They recognized that. Now, Rome had problems, obviously. Slavery, Christians were getting beheaded in Rome. I'm not praising Rome. A lot of people like to praise Rome. I'm not praising Rome. I'm not doing that. That's not what I'm doing. But I am saying this, though. I'm saying that the structure of the American government is predicated upon certain eternal ideas. And if you use structure to go against those ideas, you're contradicting the structure's purpose, and you're making the structure not work towards its intended ends. Hillary Clinton is trying to place Americans' values deep in the subjectivism of white supremacy, the temporality of white supremacy, because white supremacy will not be around forever in any substantive way, I don't think. Maybe the idea will be around in some, but not in any substantive way. But it's rooting so many of our decisions through that. So instead of considering the merits of a voting law, we should consider white supremacists and just dismiss it. Instead of considering the merits of equal discussion, or a critical discussion, we just say that it disadvantages minorities, and that's it. Instead of considering the merits of anything in a substantial way, what are we doing? Here's what we're doing. We're dismissing things, not engaging with them fruitfully, honestly, and boxing ourselves into this sort of narrow-minded hellscape that we find America in today. Why do you think so many Americans can't talk to each other without fighting? Why do you think there are these links between political belief and lifespan and all this nonsense? And brain structure. Why do you think all this stuff is happening in the first place? A lot of us are forgetting, and this may seem like an appeal to tradition, but so be it. A lot of us are forgetting the purposes of things. White supremacy is a social ill. Let's fight it on a social level. And look, I hate white supremacy. But guess what? I also hate black supremacy too. Louis Farrakhan, the Nation of Islam, black. I'm against all of that stuff. Umar Johnson and his Pan-Africanism nonsense, I'm against that too. Tommy Sotomayor and his men's rights bullshit. Excuse me for language. Excuse me for language. But I'm against that too. I'm against all that too. And I'll have to do a different episode about the men's rights movement, because they are a different can of worms, by the way. So I think we ought to oppose every form of collectivism on the basis of it being a false depiction of the human being. Not on the basis of it being, the wrong kind of collective idea. Collective ideas are typically very wrong for a very particular reason. All right, guys. I'm going to take about a 3-minute break. I got to go get some water. When I come back, we will do call-ins. We will do call-ins when I come back. So just stay with me, please. Thank you guys for coming to this episode, this very disjointed episode of Pensive Politics with Christian Watson. I'll be back in about 3 minutes. Stay here, okay? All right, guys, we're back. Thank you guys for your patience. Thank you for being here. As the show persists, I'll get much better at doing this live. I'll just be honest with you guys. I'm not used to doing this live. I'm mostly used to just sitting and talking by myself, and so if I seem to stop a lot, or I seem to stop to think a lot, I'm doing this live. So just know that's why. If you guys ever go back and watch some of the older episodes of Pensive Politics, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But we're going to be doing this Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday around 2:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Around that time. We couldn't do that today because we were getting things ready. Well, thank you, Patrice. I appreciate it. Look, I'm trying, man. I'm trying. I have to stop a lot, and I have to. So, thank you for staying, though, guys. I appreciate it. No, we're doing call-ins right now. So here's some ground rules, guys. Number one, please don't curse. Please don't curse. Please don't do it. I mean, I curse sometimes. We want to keep the channel monetized. I have nothing against cursing. I think that there are places for cursing. Please don't curse. Number two, please don't no slurs. No, if you disagree with me, and I hope there are people here who are watching who disagree with me, because I want to debate someone right now. I kind of feel like it. Then please come and talk, but be respectful, please. Be respectful. Be kind. Be joyous. Have a good time. Life is not that serious, man. I mean, just appreciate your every breathing moment you have. It'll be okay. Anyway, so and all in all, just understand that you're coming on to have a respectful conversation. So just no cursing, no anger, no negativity, and we'll get right into this. Okay, so here is the links for call-ins, and I'm only doing it one at a time. I'm doing it one at a time. One at a time. So, yeah, one at a time. So, the first person who comes, well, depending on who the first person is. Okay, one person's here already, and I know who he is. Okay, I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna wait on you. I'm waiting. I'm waiting on you. Feel free to come in, guys. I don't bite. Don't be shy. If you want to talk, of course. If you don't want to talk, then it's okay. But the link is right there in the chat, and Yeah, we'll have a good time. Okay. So once person's already here, I'll let them in.
Hello,
Carson. How are you doing?
Hello. I'm good.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you.
Oh,
I can hear you.
Perfect. You're trying to cheat me out of my spot.
No, I'm not trying to cheat you out of your spot.
You were.
No, it wasn't. No, how could I do that?
Because you were. I know. It would be cruel. That's what I'm saying. Anyways. Oh, I agree. So.
Yes.
How's everyone doing? I mainly wanted to come in to threaten all your viewers and tell them to like the stream, and you like the stream, okay? You like the stream,
man.
Support, donate, money, send money,
dude. No.
Look. Okay, he's over there. I'm still not used to cameras, but donate money because he hasn't paid me. I've been begging him to pay. That
is a lie. That is a lie. Okay. All right.
I have been.
All right. Yeah, really? You have?
No.
Really?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. More or less. Anyways.
More or less.
Okay. Yeah. More or less.
Okay.
Yeah. Well. So there's no one else joined yet. We should get a group chat in here. We should visit.
No,
they're all cowards.
No, okay.
They're scared.
Oh God! See, this is why I didn't want to let you in, man. This is why, man.
No, this is good. I was actually going to ask you a question.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
So.
No. Okay. No.
What?
No.
No, I'm serious.
No, not you. No.
Please.
No.
Please. It's a legitimate question.
No, I know this didn't just happen. Didn't just happen.
See, it works. I told you. Boom. That's what you got to do. Yeah. No.
I have a Bob. Okay.
That told you.
I got a certain thing.
Thank you, Bob.
When people stop. First thing, yes, Bob. Thank you. When people start sending me money,
yeah, you start crying.
It's happened a few times on the stream. No, don't laugh at me. It's happened a few times on the stream. Thank you, Bob. That's very special. Thank you. Wow. I still don't understand it, man. Thank you.
Yeah. Honestly, me neither. I have never seen money in my life.
Yes, you have. Okay, man. All right, man. Okay. All right. So, what's your question, Carson? What's your question?
Okay, so my question is,
what's your question?
Recently, so I'm a bit obsessed about intellectual property, right?
Yes.
So recently, I heard an argument, or not recently, but there's an interesting argument about it that I heard. Try not the new settings. I see. Nice, very nice.
Trying to.
But, yeah, it ain't working. But come on,
it's not working.
There, come on.
We'll
get there eventually. It's fine. I'll help you out after the stream. Anyways, so recently I heard this argument about intellectual property. Yeah, exactly. Send him the money if you want to see him cry.
No.
Send him.
No.
Just say some really heartfelt and moving comments with the money.
Carson.
Okay. Say something like, I have a family of 4 and this money could have been used, to prevent them starving, but I am sending it to you. So anyways, back on topic.
Yeah, that'll make me feel good, right? That'll make me feel great.
Well, you'll cry. That's the point. But back
I won't be
topic.
crying tears of joy.
Back on topic.
Okay. Yes, please back on topic. Oh God, man. Okay. Man.
So what I was gonna say.
Okay.
So there's essentially an argument about intellectual property, right? That So basically any intellectual property, right? So about encryption, right? So encryption, basically you can take something and you can encrypt it and it can turn into any other set of numbers in the universe, hypothetically. So the argument...
Sure.
Yeah, the argument is basically that any object can be transmuted into a set of numbers. Therefore, any intellectual property can also be transmuted into the same set of numbers. Therefore, if you own a piece of intellectual property, because it is a pattern by nature and patterns can be encrypted onto other patterns, you theoretically own every single piece of property in the universe. Therefore, you can't own intellectual property. I think I said that right. It's probably not, but
what? Okay,
yeah.
okay. Back up.
Yeah.
Say everything you said.
Okay.
Again.
So basically the idea is that take this for example. See this?
Okay. Yes,
this is a pattern. It's like a set of numbers.
That's right. Well, okay. So wait. Is this the idea that the universe itself is like just some sort of set of computer code or some set of number codes? That this idea is?
No. It's more basically. Are you familiar with materialists? The materialists, basically.
The materialist viewpoint.
Yeah. Basically, that everything
matter
is
and atoms.
Exactly. So basically,
yes.
what the idea is that everything can represent a certain something, right? So like you can get a set of numbers that represent this. So theoretically, I could take the entire molecular structure of this, run it through a formula, and it would end up being a song by, let's say, Beyonce. If I had the correct formula to basically run that through. Now, so the idea being is basically that since intellectual properties are what's that called? I guess you could say the word is basically just patterns. Basically, the idea, the overarching general concept is that you can't own a pattern because a pattern repeats itself other places in the universe. And it basically patterns can be, I guess you could say, turned into other patterns very easily, is the idea.
So this viewpoint requires me to accept a materialist foundation, though.
Not necessarily. I mean,
well,
if you accept
how you argued it just now.
Yeah.
Okay. Why are you licking the knife, dude?
You're
gonna get me. What the? Heck?
Probably.
Okay.
But no. Basically,
okay. Back to
the idea is that everything has a molecular structure, right? So everything can technically. That molecular structure can be condensed to numbers, and then those numbers can be basically
why can
encrypted
it be condensed to numbers?
Well, why just take an intellectual
numbers.
Like if you have, let's say, I don't know, a certain amount of atoms or basically a certain number for each atom, you've got a certain pattern in that object, right? So
what?
Yeah.
What?
That's what.
Okay. So I take okay.
Yeah.
I have this AirPod case right here. Let me see if I'm getting this concept correctly. Okay, I have this AirPod case.
Also, I see that guy. 1 second. I see that guy in the chat saying that Stephen Kinsella guy. Yeah, I agree. Anyways,
yeah. So I have this AirPod case.
Yes.
So this AirPod case. Let's assume this was like an abstract thing. Right? Let's assume this was a digital AirPod case instead of a physical one.
Yeah.
So this digital AirPod case can theoretically be, and don't you dare interrupt me when I say this. I'm trying to understand.
Yes.
It could theoretically be a set of patterns somewhere in the universe, and those set of patterns could be reduced to number form so they could be measurable. And this is basically the structure of everything else in the world, in the universe. And therefore, to try to own something that's abstract and not tangible is to own the basic structure of the universe, and therefore it is impossible. Is that correct?
It's kind of, except for it's not the basic structure of the universe. It's basically a numerical pattern, which then can be encoded or decoded into a different pattern. So, like, have you seen the website? I think it's the Tower of Babel. Let me find it real quick.
Look, guys.
Library.
You guys think I'm so smart and everything. I don't understand what he's talking about right now.
Yeah, like this guy in chat
not
says,
as smart as you think I am.
This guy in chat says DNA would be a good analogy. I think it's material, but can also be converted into a series of numbers. And also, basically, the idea. Wow. I am. Just want to clarify that. Jankum, look it up. JEN. I think it's 1 second. JEN. Is it How do you spell that? Yeah, JENKEM.
Okay,
hold on. All the viewers in this chat, right now, listen up. Look up JENKEM. Okay, look that up. Go look that up. Make it at home.
I bet you.
Make it at home and try it out.
I bet you.
Anyways,
okay. No.
Back on topic.
Okay. Carson. Okay, I'm trying to understand this.
Yes.
This talk. Okay. I have this AirPod case.
Yes.
Let's conceptualize this AirPod case as a non-tangible object for a moment. This AirPod case is a non-tangible object. Could theoretically be a set of patterns. Yes. And almost every non-tangible object is a set of patterns. And those set of patterns can be reduced and measurable by numbers. Therefore, those set of patterns cannot be owned by anyone.
Basically, that's the concept.
Is that the argument?
Basically, yeah. Okay.
Now, this applies only to non-tangible digital stuff, correct?
Yeah, I imagine it does. Exactly, because physical things, there's multiple copies, but they're each physical. Like basically, it's you own a specific single of the pattern. But when you claim you own the whole pattern, it's kind of like if I said, see these headphones right here, I own the pattern of this headphone. Therefore, every other single headphone in the universe that shares this pattern, I own.
Okay, but is the person who believes in intellectual property saying that? So you just admitted they could own a single of the pattern. So why can't someone say, okay, this is my single of the pattern, this is my area right here of the pattern, and therefore I own this, and therefore I'm going to enforce that through law? Why would that be inconsistent under your paradigm?
Well, because you can own a single intellectual property on your hard drive, right? That is the physical property. But then as soon as, let's say, you upload it to the internet and someone else downloads it, it's another pattern. It's a separate physical pattern. It's a new one. It was just created out of thin air. It's not your physical pattern. So then no longer can you claim ownership over that separate physical pattern.
Okay. So I can claim ownership over what is mine, but if someone replicates it, I cannot claim ownership because it's a different pattern.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, why does this principle fall short in the material world, though, with objects?
Oh, it doesn't. Like you can own, I can own this, and then you can own another one of these, and each of these patterns. Now, the only difference with intellectual property is it's not scarce; it's infinitely duplicatable.
But hold on. If I have a certain brand of headphones in the real world, though, and I want to patent that, I want to protect that. I can't.
You can't. No. Well, why not? Because that's a pattern.
Because someone else is mixing their labor with a different kind of pattern, and that's not mine.
Well. So yeah, basically, the idea is, let's say you patent these headphones right here, right?
Right.
Okay, so you take these, you patent them, you say no one else can make these. Now, you have just claimed the entire pattern over any manifestation of that pattern throughout the entire universe.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
You haven't homesteaded any of it. You're just basically saying, I own this pattern now, which is basically, it's lunacy in the finest sense, essentially. Well, but no,
it's impossible. You cannot own any and all versions of that particular thing.
Precisely.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay. Well, you just explained to me the entire intellectual property thing.
There's a lot more. I could talk for hours, but I'm not gonna. I'll let you get to your next viewers, whoever there. I was gonna. One final thing was what was I gonna say?
Carson. Man, excuse him, guys. He's a friend of mine. Excuse him. I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. I keep him on timeout. Okay. Anyway, next caller. Oh God. Hello. Hi, Patrice. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm all right.
I'm liking this call-in format.
You are? Oh, I'm kind of regretting it. Not you. You seem like a very sweet lady, but
you know what? No, it's great because we get to see who these people are, or you get to see who I am in the chat. It gives me more credibility, that I'm not just some weird bot person or whatever. But what I wanted to talk about was going back to immigration because I want to know what your thoughts are on what the ideal situation would be. And then also, as an aside from that, I think learning a common language in a country is so integral that I think that's actually a super weak point that we have. Because if we can't communicate, I mean, that's like the very basis. And, you know, whether it's a new language we learn, or we just decide on one, or everyone at least learns two or something, I think that would go a long way of just integrating people in a very natural, holistic, happy way that's not super forced. But once you can talk to people, you understand your similarities and how to deal with each other. And there's a lot of problems that just go away because you actually understand what someone's saying.
Right. Yeah, so there's a few things there. You said, number one, the common language and what the ideal situation is. So I think that the common language is probably a little bit more pertinent to address because that is predicated upon material reality right now, whereas the ideal situation might be an abstraction in my own mind. So let's go with that first. I think that it is wise, whether you're going to America or not, to learn one of three languages: English, Russian, or Chinese, Mandarin. Because, as we understand, a lot of global commerce and global transactions are being geared towards those three countries. And so, regardless of where you go, it is pertinent to learn any of those languages. Now, in the case of America, I suppose it's pertinent to learn English, but I hesitate to say that because in America there are so many ethnic conclaves with their own cultural mores and customs that allow them to speak as little English as they want and speak as much as they need and speak as much of their native language, as they may need to. Now, this is not everywhere in America. There are certain parts of America where this is not a reality, but there are many parts where a lot of people settle where this is a reality. I mean, even if you go to any city of America that has a part of it that has a majority Hispanic population, a lot of the signs will be in Spanish. A lot of the stores will be at Mexican restaurants or Cuban or whatever. I mean, a lot of the things will be in their native languages. So I want to kind of explore what is the practical utility of learning the general language of a country if you really only interact with a very, very small portion of that country. Because, you know, when we say society, a lot of us tend to imagine this big, giant organism in which all of its parts are interconnected and there's some sort of core nucleus to it. And I think that's a pretty bad idea of understanding society. I think society is the micro-interactions of all of our the micro-interactions of individuals within certain places that form the appearance of a whole mass organism, but when you peer beneath the surface, it's very different. So when I go to the store to go get some coffee or to go get some snacks, I'm engaging in a form of society with the cashiers, with the managers, with the bag boys, with the bus boys. When I get in my car and go to my mechanic, I'm engaging in a certain kind of society. I mean, when I go drive across state lines and I go see the state trooper patrolling and I go talk to him, I'm engaging in a certain kind of society. I think that society is much more concrete and refined and confined than we think it is. And if we are to accept this, it would seem to me as if the basis for English only or learning the language as a general sense is reduced. It may be wise if you are doing some kind of interstate work or whatever that brings you outside of your community. But for everyday life, I'm trying to figure out why someone who lives in Chinatown or who lives in a Hispanic part of town and stays there and knows the language there would have an obligation to know the general language. So what are your thoughts on all that?
I think that a good reason for that is that it is a barrier. Like, it's a very basic, very real barrier to establishing business, establishing growth or gaining growth, I guess, in a community. Coming from my perspective, there's a lot of Mexican people who've come in and they've put businesses in place that I actually want to patronize, but I can't speak with them And so, I mean,
Right.
I've started learning Spanish, but
Right.
I think it might be good to have a minimum expected 2 languages in the country at least. Have one be English and one be something else, and or whatever 2. I think 2 would be good,
Mhm.
simply because it takes down the barriers dividing as far as understanding what people are going
Mhm.
through. It can bring you together politically. How can you
Right.
vote on the same things if you don't understand what the language even means of what they're talking about? And I mean, having it
Right.
translated is fine, but do some things get dropped in translation? Or it depends on the effort that someone's willing to put into that translation, right? And I think as far as like even I think it goes from small community even up to the highest levels. But at the small community, like I want to just engage with my own neighbors, and I think that's something that we are lacking desperately in, having good neighbor relationships, and we're like um, keeping ourselves away from others. We spend too much time in our house or online interacting with people, but not enough in our community.
Mm.
And those kind of barriers, they're going to increase. I mean, we are getting
Mm.
lots of immigration, and I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing as long as we can come together with our things that we have in common and that are good. Because I
Mm.
don't believe that all these people coming over, immigrants or work visa people,
Mm.
I think that it could be all very good but it's not going to be good if we're separated by something so basic as language.
Hmm. Do you So I get what you're saying. I think that there is a lot of value, and if you're going to a majority English country, there's a lot of value in learning that generally. But I think back to the point that I was trying to make. I think that if most of your interactions in life in that country are going to be in a particular area where your native language is spoken a lot, like if you're in Chinatown, you speak Mandarin. I mean, I don't see the obligation for you to spend too much time on English. Look, and as far as neighborly interactions, I think that a lot of people have this sort of sense of community that's assumed oftentimes. Not everyone who has neighbors really wants anything to do with them. You just got to test to see if the individual has that in their desires. And I and this is just maybe this is just my experience, but I've had neighbors in many different instances, whether it's the neighbor in my dorm room at college, whether it's the neighbor in the houses I used to stay at, and I've never felt connected to them because we were close in proximity. I only connect to people who I feel would be connected to me on a higher level, and that may their proximity may be a sign of that, it may not be a sign of that, or whatever. I typically look at their interests first. So I don't I don't assume that everyone has the desire to connect and to have that brotherly bond. Some folks just want to go and do their own thing. A lot of people, especially a lot of immigrants who are here, some of whom are working in the agricultural industry, have no desire to connect with people. They have a desire to go into the fields, pluck out fruit or plant fruit all day, plant cabbage all day, and then bring the money they get from that going to go back to their country. So I think that there are some reasons that are not as good as others for people to learn English. But I do think that it is important in a general sense for people to have a basic grasp of the language. But whether that has any practical utility to their everyday life, that's going to be contingent upon their own circumstances, in my personal opinion. So,
Gotcha.
I appreciate your perspective, though. It's very important, and about the ideal situation, which I meant to get to. The ideal situation is going to be a situation in which the free movement of people is unimpaired, and people who come here with peaceful intentions can come here and they can live here, and those who come here with non-peaceful intentions can be removed by force if necessary, in which there is not a stigma attached to someone because they come from a different country, and we suspect they may hold a certain opinion. There's not so much emphasis put on the weight of the vote because there's so little of the vote in PACs, whereas in society right now there's so much of the vote in PACs. In an ideal situation, all that stuff would be on the table, but unfortunately we're not in an ideal situation. We're in a fundamentally flawed condition right now, but I have faith that we can push to a condition that is going to be more ideal than usual. But I have an aversion to doing what Vogelin warned against, right? Immanentizing the eschaton, bringing heaven onto earth. I have an aversion to that. I recognize that there are some constants in this universe. There are actually many constants in the universe that I cannot necessarily revoke at all, that are outside of my control and that I am bound by. And
yeah, for sure.
I think that a lot of the problem with a lot of people on the left is that they don't recognize this whatsoever. They think they can change human nature. They think they can change the universe, which is just not true. So
I think we should find beauty in the chaos.
Yeah, that's a very Petersonian point. Yeah, very Jordan Peterson-esque point. Well, actually, no, I don't think it is. He thinks chaos is bad.
I think chaos can be good. It's just depending on what you do with it, and
but yeah, that's my opinion.
Lead to better things.
Yeah, that's my opinion. But Patrice, I appreciate you. I'm gonna probably take 2 more.
Yeah, thank you.
Calls. Thank you so much for being on, Patrice. I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
All right, guys. We're gonna do 1 or 2 more calls. Again, if you want to talk to me, if you disagree with me, especially, please come on and talk and chat with me. You can just go to that link, and I will let you in. We'll have a conversation. Yeah. So, if you want to come back on, if you don't want to come on, that's fine with me. I can end early if I want, but I would like to talk to a few more people. So the link is in the chat if you want to come on and chat with me. And our next show will be on Saturday. No one? No one at all. Wow. No one wants to come on. Interesting. Yeah, there is a great deal of cultural homogeneity in many high trust societies. That's for many different reasons. Guys, if you want to come talk to me, please look. I am right here. I don't bite. I'm not gonna grill you. I just wanna have a conversation. Come on. Okay, someone just came in, but the devices are not connected. Okay, they're connected now. Okay. All right, let's see what we got here. Hey, a lot of people do. Oh dear. Oh my. I think you're frozen. Oh, not anymore.
Hello.
Hi. How are you?
Is it coming through, or is it bad internet?
It's coming through now.
Not too bad. I just wanted to.
Yeah, now
it is cool.
Yeah, now it's fine.
Yeah, I don't know if I've got anything deep or meaningful to really discuss tonight, but I did want to thank you because I tuned into your last live stream and you read out my your one on privilege, and you read out like my comments and whatnot. We answered them.
I did.
So I wanted to say
with Paul. I did. That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So I wanted to say a big thank you for that for a start. Anyway.
No problem.
And
whenever people make smart, thank you for making smart comments. Whenever people make smart comments, I'm very happy. Just as long as you're not like Carson, then you're fine.
Yeah, but like intellectually, like you're at where I wish I was at now. Like, and you're so much younger than myself. Like, I should have started with this a lot sooner. Because don't always feel like I can articulate my viewpoints sometimes when I get involved with a lot of the stuff.
Well, I mean, I was struggling to articulate myself today. I think so. Look, we all have our good days and our bad days. A lot of folks tell me that, Christian, I wish, I was as articulated. What that idea conveys to me is that they think that they've lost, that they're past their time, and that's not true. I think everyone has the ability, especially if they have internet connection, to seek knowledge and to try to figure out what the meaning of that knowledge is in the general sense, and to apply that knowledge to your everyday life. Everyone has the ability to do that, no matter how old you are, no matter how saddled you are with work. If you make the time for it, if you make the effort for it, anyone can do that. So, me, I'm largely self-educated. I am a university, although I don't think I've learned very much that I use in my work here at a university. So I just, now, because I'm self-educated, that means that I have a lot of gaps in my knowledge, and thankfully there have been people who have stepped up who are trying to help me with that. But I take it as it comes, my friend. I take it as it comes. I am patient with myself on my intellectual journey, and I think that everyone should be patient with themselves on their intellectual journey, because again, it's a journey. It's not a race. It's a journey, and the journey is going to be more important, in my opinion, than the destination sometimes.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yes. Hello? I think your connection is going in and out, my friend.
Oh, damn.
It's fine. It's all right.
This is still coming through now.
Oh, it's coming through now. Oh, all right. That was that. Okay. If he comes back, we'll let him back in. Okay, guys. Again, please come talk to me. You're doing remarkably well for age 21 in particular. Oh, Bob, you're so supportive and nice to me. Thank you. I appreciate it. I think I could be doing a lot better if I discipline myself a little bit more, but we'll work on that. We'll work on that. We'll work on that. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, the one voice. But anyway, guys, please, if you guys want to come on and chat, I'll do one more call. Want to come on and chat with me? The link's right there. You don't have to show your face either, by the way. You can just be faceless if you want to. You like StreamYard lets you not show your face. So if you want to chat with me, please, I'm up for it. Please. And if not, then we can end in a moment. But please, I'm up for it. While we wait, someone tell me, what do you think of the new version of the show? Like it, hate it? Yeah, the stream's fine, I think. But again, if any of you want to come on and talk with me, the link is right there. Do you have a regular regimen for pre and post debates to recharge? Well, last night was just 60 minutes. Really 49 minutes if you count all the breaks and everything. Okay. Come on, Edward, come on. Hey, come on. Dang it. And so I didn't need one for last night. I think today's show was rushed. I will say that today's show was rushed. 100% rushed. So that's why I was a little bit spotty. Because by the way, I do this stuff stream of consciousness too, by the way. But today's show was rushed. So that's why I seem a little bit spotty. Saturday's show will not be rushed. I'm gonna have enough time to handle that. But for the debate that I did with Gothics, now quantum T at time is there we go, Bob dropping the wisdom. No, you're right. I wasn't drained from last night. Last night was fine. I was totally fine. All right, we got one of my favorite people coming on. Hi, how are you, sir?
Oh my gosh, I can't believe this. I can't believe this is working. This is insane. How's it going, man?
It's going good, Edward. How are you, buddy?
Doing good. Are you experiencing an echo? I don't have headphones or anything like that.
No, I'm not. No, not at all. Not at all. Are you?
I'm not. I'm glad to be
Okay.
here. I'm actually on my work duty right now, so I don't have much time, but I wanted to experience what it was like to be on your show, especially since it's the premiere episode.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing special quite yet, but we're getting there. We're getting there. We're
Yeah.
getting there. Yeah, we're getting there. And this is the premiere episode of the second incarnation of the show, right? So the first incarnation was audio. Now we're doing live video. Do not look up. Yeah, look, I'm sorry. He was trolling my audience today. I'm gonna admonish him. I'm going to admonish Carson later. Sorry, Edward, please go on.
No, I was just wondering, since you didn't get the chance to elaborate on your debate because they kept cutting you off and not letting you talk because you were the smartest guy there. I was wondering if you could actually enlighten us on the issues regarding redlining and regarding what was the other thing they talked about? They talked about the slave patrol myth, the idea that modern day policing came from slave patrol, which has been discredited multiple times. So I was wondering if you could go into detail on that.
Yeah, I'll go into a little bit. So redlining, okay.
Sure.
Redlining has been illegal for 53 years. Redlining has been illegal for 53 years. And there is a division of the Department of Justice which is specifically designed not only to investigate claims of redlining, but to investigate mortgage companies and to investigate practices of other lending institutions to make sure they're not doing redlining. And there have and in recent times, there's not really been many cases that have been prosecuted because what doesn't really happen anymore. What people say when they mean redlining today, they mean the fact that a lot of African Americans in urban areas, particularly, may not get certain kind of loan, mortgages or loans or whatever. The fact is, a lot of African Americans, especially in inner city urban areas where a lot of these disparities in housing loans are seen, have bad credit. And we have seen the impacts of letting people who have bad credit have homes. We saw that with the housing bubble. It burst. It's not a good thing. So it's a case of historical synonyms, right? It's a case of taking what appeared to be what appears to be problematic because it mirrors something that once upon a time happened in history, and then claiming that thing is happening right now in history. It's a kind of sly conceptual ad hominem that is not at all epistemically rigorous and can be knocked down if someone has a basic understanding of the facts. As for the slave patrol,
I think there's isn't there a difference between something being true on a case-by-case basis versus it being true aggregately? So, for example, even if you look at between the 1920s and the 1960s, which is whenever redlining was banned, the aggregate home ownership rates of black and white people was growing at the same rate, even with cases of discrimination, right? So, even if that was true, case per case, it wasn't something that drastically created the modern day wealth gap that we see, right?
Right, exactly. That's one argument to make. I also think that, we have to understand though, when you mention case by case, the idea of a case by case takes into account certain circumstances that are contingent. And what a lot of people who are trying to look at black home ownership and the gap between black home ownership and the black wealth and white wealth, a lot of them are looking in areas where black home ownership and black wealth doesn't exist because wealth in that area in general does not exist. In the inner cities, wealth generally just does not exist. It is because the inner cities are much poorer. I mean, really. And so if you go looking for places like that, you're going to see a disparity. Absolutely. I think that when you look outside of it, you see something very different happen. Now, as for the slave patrol thing, so we have to understand this is a case of equivocation, clear equivocation here. I mean, confusing language to make things look as if they're some way when they're really not. So, policing in America, right? So, policing in the colonies, the earliest form of policing, not the police, policing, which is simply the act of a certain body of people governing something through the semblance of force, which really can happen outside of a government context or not of a government context. The idea of policing, right, an act of policing in the colonies was the slave patrols. That was obviously done by a lot of slave owners to make sure that their slaves didn't run away, evil, bad stuff. But to claim that that is an example of what the police grew out of is to falsely is to make an equivalency between the establishment of metropolitan police departments and the general act of policing. It's an equivocation. It's a confusion. In America, the earliest policing, I believe, was established between the 1840s to the 1850s, and that was in Boston. Boston had established, because before Boston, there were just night watchmen, right? They're just nighttime watchers who were around patrolling to make sure the drunks and the vagrants didn't mess up the city. But then the people of Boston decided, hey, we need something a little bit more formal than this. They established the first police force in the nation. Then by the 1880s, almost every metropolitan area in the country had a police force. This is in the Northeast. So the origins of American policing as we understand it today came out of the North and came out of the desire to police moral behaviors, not to police slaves and not to enslave black people. To claim otherwise is a historical, illogical, and therefore epistemically irresponsible claim made by people who want to bury people's understandings beneath the sand. So that's what I have to say about that.
Correct. And I think there's just this ill will idea that racism has inertia, this like institutional inertia. I think that's the word that Tim Wise uses, who's a famous activist. And it's just this idea that like
Tim Wise is pretty
oh gosh, he's the worst. But
he's
anyways, just this idea that modern day institutions are intrinsically tied to their historical origins, but that's not the way institutions work. Institutions are a lot more complex than that. But anyways, I have to go. I'm back on my shift, but it was great to be on the show. I appreciate it.
You too, man. Thank you. I appreciate it, man. I'll see you later. Okay. Bye. Always very nice to have intelligent conversation. Okay, I'll do one more, then I gotta go, guys. I got things. I'll do one more though. So if you guys want to come and talk to me, debate me, or just say hello, then please come into the link. I got one more, then I gotta go. I gotta go. Thank you guys for being here today. I appreciate it. One more, and then I'll get out of here. So just anyone wants to come on, please feel free to come on and talk to me. I don't bite. I'm happy to talk to you. I mean, so. Please. It can be about anything too, by the way. Anything. Congrats on the funny number. I don't know what that means for us this line. Yeah, if anyone wants to come on and talk to me about anything, the link's right there. I'm right here. I'm right here, guys. So please. I'll wait for about 4 more minutes. I don't understand what you're talking about, Frosted Slime. I get what you're talking about, but I don't understand how I have the funny note. I don't understand it. This show is PG, man. This is PG, not PG-13. This is a PG show. This is a PG show. It's a PG show. Okay, guys, I'm gonna send it again. Oh, and the URL. Oh. Ha. Okay, that's funny. Okay. If you guys want to come and talk to me, link's right there. You did? I didn't see it, the one voice. Oh, yes, sorry. My apologies. Just wanted to add the friend you helped me with once told me people confuse knowledge with intellect. Sad we're fighting the same. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. People do confuse knowledge for intellect. Although, what is knowledge, though? I mean, Plato thought that knowledge was the reflection of the truth, whereas opinion was a deviation from knowledge. So now, not everyone believes in the Platonic ideal, and I have some criticism of it myself. I do believe that I believe that ultimate knowledge itself is most certainly the reflection of the truth. But Plato believed that you can only, for Plato, you find the truth in the realms, in the forms. I think I can find the truth without going through all that rationalistic gobbledygook. I can find the truth right here on earth, brother. In my opinion. Now, look, I am a Christian, so there is a sort of more metaphysical bent to my personal ideology. But I do believe that the world is fashioned in a way that we can perceive the truth with our senses. All right. The one voice is on. We'll see if this works. Hopefully. Hi. Hello?
Can you hear me okay?
Hi. How you doing? Welcome back.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Not too bad. I put another shot being as no one else was taking you up on it, so.
I don't know why. I don't get it. I'm not a mean person.
No, that's
just kidding.
Yeah, I was gonna say before I got cut off before, like, the only person I have these sort of discussions with is like my best friend Adam, who went to university, and he said that he said it's actually a joy having these discussions with you because, like, all my fellow students and my fellow people at university have an angle. They're all trying to convert me. They're all trying to push something, whereas we can just discuss and disagree and, like, say we're not going to come to a conclusion, but also, like, change each other's minds or just talk for the sake of talking.
Yeah.
And then he said also that
the state of the academy right now is in disrepair. It's abysmal. For an organization who promises to promote people who are supposedly custodians of knowledge, the academy has, over the past 50 to 60, 70 years, with the advent of all these critical theories, but this postmodern deconstructionism, has been very, 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 very good at destroying the very foundations by which we obtain any kind of substantive knowledge. And you've seen that bleed into the students. And what the academy as an institution, as people in the academy as an institution do, they capitalize upon tragedy. And now sometimes they capitalize upon tragedy in a way that leads to what could be considered epistemically rigorous and sound conclusions. So, for example, the Vietnam War, and there was a Kent State, the shooting at Kent State when the people were at Kent State and they got shot by the police. Okay, a lot of people in the academia use that to fuel anti-war sentiment. Now, in my opinion, the anti-war sentiment against the Vietnam War was just. It was good. It was in line with a correct moral understanding. It was an attempt to revoke what was a flagrant attempt by the I think Kennedy, Kennedy tried to get this out by the people who got us into Vietnam. I think it was either Eisenhower or Kennedy who got into Vietnam. Attempt by them to police the beliefs of people in that area of the world. But what the academy does, it takes a morally righteous sentiment and then it applies it to this very broad idea that may have nothing to do with sentiment inherently. So they'll take the anti-war sentiment and then say, okay, imperialism is the foundational ethos of the American government. What? How does that follow? You can be against a certain war on the basis of a certain thing, but it doesn't follow because this certain war or a certain campaign is happening that imperialism forms the foundation of America. That's a logically unequivalent statement. So the academy, and this is what a lot of critical theory ideologies do too. They and a lot of them describe themselves as a place where teaching meets activism. They're activists now, and so their goals are not to dispense knowledge. Their goals are to weaponize knowledge in a manner that is advantageous to a particular temporal goal. So the eternal principle of rooting knowledge down into the earth and trying to make sure that what we do with it is fruitful and good has become the temporal, using knowledge as a weapon to change certain conditions and then continue changing certain conditions until the idea of heaven has manifested upon earth. Whether it's the idea of critical animal studies, where those professors in there want to ban all meat packaging industry. They want to treat animals as if they are humans, but they are not. Whether it's critical gender studies, where those people want to deconstruct the idea of gender and sex, which are both, sex particularly is an objective thing. They want to create heaven on earth. It's not about getting knowledge anymore.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
I was going to say, I'm a UK based, but the UK universities, I think, are heading the same way from what I've been told anyway. So and it's really odd because it's at a time in people's lives when they're supposed to be seeking their own knowledge and forming their own identity of themselves. I suppose that's what those in academia that are pushing that want to shape those minds that haven't experienced the world yet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What did you say? I'm sorry, you cut out for a moment. Hello? Yeah, you cut off. You're here now. Hi.
Hello. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm kind of, it sounds really sad because I really wanted to go to university, but I actually ended up telling my father recently, like, I'm actually grateful he didn't send me, because he said you can read, write, and count, and the rest. And I took that, if I wanted to learn about something, I was free to go pursue it on my own. So, like, I was always big into history. So I'm like, outside of, like, when I left school, I was like, if there's something historically I want to know, I can go find a book or go to my library or look it up and seek my own knowledge.
Right.
Which I can kind of, like, define me a bit more than, say, going to university thing.
Yeah. Right. And I think the idea, yeah. But, sorry. Sorry, go on.
I was just gonna say, like, my friend also said, like, the thing about really learned is that when not even having an argument, but when you're having a discussion, you can get too tied up in language and too tied up in, like, terminologies. Whereas, like, I might sit there and go, oh, well, it's a bit like this, and it might be simplistic idea. Might get the point across a lot better than all the people that like cite studies by rote or stats or anything. And these days you can't even believe stats. So, like, I've always made comparisons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. And Bob just made a good point. Avoiding university was a major stroke of luck. You avoided a great deal of indoctrination. If you want to learn, you can do that. Yes, you can do that without school. 100%. If I could do it over again, I would not be at university. I'll say that much. I have my career is this podcasting stuff. I have not even, the only thing I have used in my career is my philosophy training, which I had been doing before I started university in the first place. So, I mean, I think that it's a waste of most people's times. But, thank you for being here, man. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for sharing your story. And I hope that you'll come back for future shows, okay? Thank you so much, man.
Well, I'm on your Discord as well, so you can find me there.
Yes, you are. So
absolutely. I appreciate
your viewership means a lot to me,
time.
brother. It does.
I really do.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. All right. Thank you, man. Appreciate it. All right, guys. I need to get out. I need to go and do some more work. But here is my link to my Discord if you guys want to join my Discord, so you can interact with me anytime you want to. I appreciate all 8 of you for being here. We are going to keep doing these streams. I don't care how long it takes us. We're going to keep doing these streams until we are one of the top, or at least one of the most influential political philosophy shows on this platform. So I appreciate all of you being here for the ride. I appreciate all of you for sticking with me. I appreciate all of you for being kind to me and supporting me. And I want you guys to keep doing it. I want you guys to keep thinking about these issues very critically. And I want you guys to do one thing that is going to be the most important thing you ever do, at least as it relates to this show. I want you guys to please stay pensive. Bye, guys. Love you guys. See you later. Bye.